Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips.
So welcome everyone to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey.
Hello everybody, nice to see you again.
As you know, Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show where we focus on metaphysics and spirituality and bringing you information to help you unlock your truth. And you can tune in to us live on 101.7 FM every Tuesday from 7 to 8 Pacific. You can live stream us on civl.ca and catch the podcast on drlesliephillips.com. Well, listeners, let me ask you the question, what does success mean to you? So many of us in our lives we chase after status, we chase after career, we chase after money because we think that that is going to bring us fulfillment. And then we find that it actually doesn't. And so, listeners, we have a fantastic guest with us tonight, and he is going to talk to us all about that, and more specifically about the ego. And he is going to help us unlock the truth about the ego, because he is the author of a book called The Ego's Code. And I'm really excited to meet this guest because he, like me, he has a professional background and then became a spiritual teacher. And so without further ado, let me tell you more about our guest, whose name is Clayton John Anger. Now, he used to be a mergers and acquisitions tax specialist, and nowadays he's a consultant who travels around the world helping executives and leaders transform performance and achieve sustainable growth in their businesses. But he is also a psychic medium and a spiritual teacher. And he works with people all over the world from all walks of life. And like I mentioned, he is the award-winning author of a book called The Ego's Code, and he travels around the world talking about the ego. Now, one of the things I found most interesting about our guest is the way that he first discovered this information that he wrote down in his book, because he actually was doing a meditation at Stonehenge and received some clear, detailed guidance on why humans experience negativity, the true purpose of ego, and how to be free of it. And he found a pattern to our negativity, which he calls the ego's code, and he discovered a way to decipher it, clear out negativity, remove unhelpful habits, and change old belief patterns so that we can live the fulfilled life that we always wanted. So welcome to the show, Clayton.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here, all the way from the UK.
Hello. Hello to a fellow old countryman from where I used to come from. And
He doesn't look that old, Leslie.
Okay, a young countryman.
Thank you, Corey. I appreciate that.
Okay, no problem. Not to stroke the ego or anything, just,
Hey, that's all good. My ego likes it.
Yeah.
So Clayton, I'm delighted to have you on the show for several reasons. Part of it is that I feel a little bit of a kinship with you just because of your background. It's very similar to mine. And also, I just have a love and a fascination to all of those ancient historical sites in Britain, especially Stonehenge. So when I learned that you had your information for your book downloaded in a meditation that you did at Stonehenge, well, I thought that was amazing, and I'd love to know more about it. So what's it like to meditate at Stonehenge, and how did that happen?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It is fabulous to be here. So if you go to Stonehenge, I'll put it into a bit of context. If you go to Stonehenge now, they have this little barrier that goes all the way around it. You can't actually get to the stones unless you go very, very early as a VIP. But about 10 years ago, a bit longer than that, when I went to Stonehenge, the story behind it was I was laying in bed in the middle of the night. My wife was in the US on business. And I got poked by my guides, and they said, you need to get up, you need to get up. I said, no, I don't want to get up, leave me alone. And then early on in the morning, they poked me. So I had all this resistance. I could feel the resistance that was building within my body. And they said, no, you have to go to Stonehenge. So I got up, I went through the resistance, and magic happened. I drove to Stonehenge. It was about a couple of hours in the car, and it was throwing it down with rain. And I remember sat there with my umbrella like this, and the rain was coming down, and I just went into a beautiful meditation. And as I went into meditation, I found myself get pulled into this portal, and through this portal I found myself surrounded by Druid elders and Druid masters, and they shared with me 3 words in the beginning: the ego teacher. And then with that, they then went on to share with me the true purpose that we actually experience negativity, and how to use it, and these are my words, as a fuel for success in our life, as opposed to keeping us stuck in the past. And what followed in terms of the weeks and the months from that trip was I kept on getting these little downloads wherever I went, and I would, just have a journal with me and just write like words down or pictures down or whatever those things are down, and eventually they become like a jigsaw puzzle, and the jigsaw puzzle then mapped across into what is now my book, The Ego's Code. And it also helped me, though, to understand my own journey and why in my 20s it was like the dark night of the soul when I was experiencing deep and dark depression. In my 30s, why I experienced the same. It also helped me to understand why I would sabotage my health consistently, why I would get super fit and then find myself stuffing my face with 10 bars of chocolate to soothe an unknown pain, or why I would build up a business and then pull it down, or why I would sabotage relationships because I was afraid of intimacy and fear of love. And so it helped me to actually unravel all of these things, because as you said in your description, wherever we experience a pain, a challenge, a hardship, or even a rut, what happens is all those things mean that we're actually not living our truth. And if you actually write the word down, rut, R-U-T, and put a T in front of the R and an H at the end, you actually get the word truth. And I realized that with our patterns, our challenges, our hardships, and our problems, our challenges, our hardships, there's a pattern to it. And that pattern became the ego's code. And I realized that with the pattern that you could actually decipher it. And so I've developed a process through my own journey to be able to actually to decipher the ego's code, so that you can actually use it as a fuel for success in your life, and actually live with more joy in your life, and in accordance with your truth, which is why I love the name of the show.
So is the pattern that you're talking about the same basic underlying pattern for everybody? Or is everybody different and your process helps unlock the pattern for each individual?
Beautiful question. Everybody's pattern is different. And because we're all on a soul's journey. And so wherever you go out into the world and you see people walking around, we're all on our own individual soul's journey. And being on a soul's journey, we have things that we need to learn. And learning presupposes that there is something that there is missing. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So to understand that, though, you need to understand the true purpose of negativity. Negativity is a natural and normal message from you to you that something is not quite right, or actually how you think it should be. And yet we've been conditioned by society, by family, by history to stuff it down, sweep it under the carpet, to ignore it. And when we do, we then wonder why it comes back with teeth and bites us in the backside, British term. So what I realized was that actually, if you look at the soul's journey, because I've been studying shamanism for about 15 years, and what happens is whenever we experience a trauma in life, it creates a tear in the soul, and part of the soul leaves and goes to a place in consciousness where it feels safe. And so you then have this void or this hole in the soul, and into that void goes all the negativity associated with that trauma, and it gets sealed off. And then people say to me on my workshops and on my events, and and when I'm working with people one-to-one or in the readings that I do, I feel like something is missing, and that's because something is. So what happens with this is the following. So everybody has a higher self, and our higher self is our true self. It is omnipresent. It is everywhere. It communicates through the heart. It's just the most majestic example of who we are. And what happens at the point of incarnation when we're born, it splits in two. And 99% of it remains the divine higher self and communicates, as I said, through the heart. The 1% becomes the ego. So the ego is actually created from the divine higher self. So the ego self and the higher self are actually one and the same thing. So what happens is that the ego gets programmed with all the negativity associated with these traumas, and it then acts like a beacon, and it sends out signals into the universe or the quantum field or the divine spiritual system, whatever label you want to call it. And it attracts to you situations and circumstances and people so that you can learn. And the whole purpose of learning is so that we can clear out this void and the soul can return. Now, because the ego communicates through the mind and the higher self communicates through the heart, and it's not one or the other, it's both. So the ego holds the lessons and the higher self holds the answers. And yet we give so much power to this 1% of who we are. And what happens is the head can rule the heart, or the heart can rule the head, but it's not one or the other, it's both. And what I mean by that is a partnership. So if the ego holds the lessons and the higher self holds the answers, we have to work together in tandem, and that becomes wholeness. And quantum physics has proven that 7.8 times per second we experience wholeness unconsciously, which means that we're always in creation.
Wow.
And so if we're always in creation, we're either creating through our negativity unconsciously, or we need to become more conscious and create through not necessarily through the positive, but through the higher emotions of what it is that we wish to create. Because so many people in life create through reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is people think that they start to focus on what is missing in their life, and the message that they actually send out is lack or fear, and so then the universe responds, and then the ego gets very excited and then you enter the ego's playground because the negativity heightens because we're not learning, we're not paying attention. It's like a 2-year-old that's having a temper tantrum.
Oh, sorry.
No, go.
It's an interesting way you put it. It reminds me of a parable in the Bible where they were talking about a malevolent spirit within somebody who was possessed, and it says, and I'll paraphrase, that you can get rid of that malevolent spirit, but you have to fill that space with something else. Otherwise, that malevolent spirit will come back and bring 7 of its friends with it.
So I love that you said it. So here's what happens. So the negativity is just energy, and all energy can be transmuted into something that will serve us or keep us stuck in the past. So all negativity comes effectively from traumas from the past. They're like echoes or whispers from the past. So every single time we experience negativity, we're literally reliving the past in the here and the now, which means that we're actually not present. And if we're not present, we can't be in creation of the things we actually want to create for ourselves consciously. So what actually, linking back into what you've said, what actually happens is when we learn and the negativity leaves and creates a clean void. And so actually the negativity changes and transmutes into something that will serve us. And then the soul can return. So what actually goes into the void is, the soul returns so we can become more and more and more whole. But the challenge is people ignores the negativity. And I say to people at my events, I said, if you imagine the energy it takes to put a rocket into space, you have that same energy trapped in our lower 3 energy centers. So imagine what we can do if we can access that energy and move that up and out and use that as a force for good in our life, as opposed to cut something that enables us to repeat the hamster wheel, going over and over and over and over again, and not learning and not learning and not learning. And I call that, the ongoing negative reaction, just round and round and round until we actually, that pattern gets interrupted, and often gets interrupted by illness that shows up in the body, or something significant happens that actually gets our attention. We are forever receiving feedback that we miss. And it's, one of the sort of things I talk about in my book is actually how to start to identify and pay attention to that feedback, and actually work with the ego, work with the negativity, work with the higher self, and not make it bad, because the higher self and ego self are one. They are one and the same thing. So it's not about making one bad or wrong. It's just about saying, right, okay, let's work together and make it happen.
Right. So the ego has a purpose, because I think there's a misunderstanding in the spiritual community that people feel that they are meant to eliminate their ego. And so presumably you would disagree with that based on what you've just said.
Well, there's a lot of books that are out there. There's a lot of teachers out there, and they're all on their own individual journey. And a lot of the content is valid, but it's about making sure you understand what is right for you as an individual. Personally, I fundamentally don't agree that the ego is the enemy that's within. I think at the end, it's about expanding our greatness out. Mm-hmm. And if you take, you can take two tennis players, for example, and I always used to be a real fan of Wimbledon, and used to have Martina Navratilova and Steffi Graf, and real fighting it out in the women's Wimbledon final. And they make each other better. They battle, they make each other better, they enable each other to rise up together. And the ego is about helping us to rise up and be better, as opposed to stuffing down and ignoring it. Yes. And it's just energy, and all energy can be released and transmuted to something that serves us. So when we learn, rather than eliminating it, what actually happens is when we learn, the ego shrinks, and it actually ascends, and it reconnects with the divine higher self. And we love the divine higher self. And then if we can just appreciate that the ego is created from the divine higher self, and it's just wants to get home. We don't like experiencing negativity ourselves every day. So imagine what's going on with the ego self within us, and we're making ourselves bad and wrong because it's part of us. It's not separate from us. It's part of us, and it's just energy that we need to release and use in a beautiful way to allow us to rise up. And I've done it many times. I've seen many people at my events do it, and I've seen different scenarios, different communities. People do similar things to enable themselves to rise up in the best way.
So, is the ego our constant companion in life? While we have a physical body, do we always have an ego?
That's a great question, and I think, in fact, my truth around that is it will be a constant companion whilst we ignore it. Because when we follow our divine intuitive truth, so when the head and the heart actually works in tandem, then the ego is actually not there. We're experiencing wholeness. So the ego's actually come together as one with the divine higher self. So when we trust our intuition and we work with our intuition, it comes together within us and enables us to experience our greatness and our power. And what happens is the ego, you could say the ego is like a signal to say we've actually moved out of flow.
Right.
We've moved out of balance.
Out of alignment.
And we don't need to be in that place. All we've got to do is pay attention.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wrote a 4-step process for people to do that.
Perfect. So it helps us it helps us realign with the source.
Completely.
Wonderful. So we're going to have to unfortunately go for a break right now, but after the break, let's ask you about that 4-step process that you just mentioned and go more deeply into your book, The Ego's Code. So listeners, you're listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and this evening we have a wonderful guest called Clayton John Ainger. And he's on a wonderful spiritual journey where he's discovered how to unlock the ego, how to understand the ego, and how we can all learn from our egos rather than battle against our egos and try to overcome them. So we will be back after these few short messages. Welcome back, listeners, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey.
Hello again.
Hi, and today on Unlocking Your Truth, we have been having a fascinating discussion about the ego with our guest, Clayton John Ainger. And he's written a book called The Ego's Code, and we're picking his brain to help us unlock the ego code for ourselves so we can all benefit from this wonderful information and teaching that was given to him by the ancient druids at Stonehenge.
I have a quick question. I have a quick background question for you. You were talking about how this all started. You were poked by your spirit guides, and if I did the math right, that was 10 years ago. But you've been doing spiritual work before this. Because my question is actually, how did you recognize that if you had just started into your spiritual work? But
I've been involved with spirit since at the age of 7. So I remember vividly at the age of 7 being visited by spirit and not having a clue what it was, and being scared and not having any understanding about what it was. And so I consciously made a choice at the age of 7 to shut it down. But there was always a Norman boy, a boy from Normandy, that would sit outside my bedroom door and watch over me. And he still sits outside my bedroom door and watches over me even to this day. And so I've always been involved with spirit, but just consciously not really been in the practice of it. And I would probably say about 15 or so years ago, everything reignited. There was a number of events that took place in my life. And it was, and I often say to people, there's triggering events. And there was triggering events, things that happened to me, which caused me to reevaluate my life, make some big changes in my life. And as a result of that, everything then kicked off again. And then I then started on effectively back on this journey as opposed to having left this journey.
So I'm interested about that time in your life. I went through something similar myself, and so let me see if I can frame the question, because I kind of lived a double life for a long time. By day, business executive in the biotech industry. By night, psychic reader, energy healer, meditation teacher. And for a while they went in parallel, and I read in your bio that you felt like you kept that part secret because it wouldn't be accepted and you'd be ridiculed, and I felt the same way. And then eventually those two things couldn't exist as these separate paths, and I had to make a decision and move more into what was more authentic and true. And I've been meeting a few people quite similar to that of late, on the people that we interview. And it's probably all happened to us within a certain period of time. And so what can we say to help people who are hitting that stage in their life now, so that their transition into authenticity is easier?
Well, that's a really, really good question. So if I think about my own life, I remember when, this was before I met my wife, I just started a consultancy, and I had Clayton Ainger Consulting, and I had Clayton Ainger Spiritual Teacher. And I remember then I met my wife, and we had Sarios, which is our current consultancy, which we started. And I still had Clayton Anger as spiritual teacher. And we got some feedback from a friend of ours who was highly respected, and he said, you can't have both. It creates confusion. People in the corporate world won't work with you.
Right.
And so I took that on board as, his belief system as my own. And I look at beliefs as the lies that we tell ourselves, because there's the word lie in the middle of the word belief. And for about 5 years, I immersed myself purely in the corporate world. But it was painful. I still work within corporate, but I work within corporate now with my agenda. And my agenda, ironically, does align with our client's agenda. Yes, I still do some traditional type of work, but the work we have developed something called the Serous Way, and the Serous Way begins with spirituality. And we want to understand the spirit of the human beings that are in there, making sure that they are aligned with themselves and their own purpose and their values, making sure that's aligned with the spirit of the organization, the culture, and is that aligned with who we are, and do we want to work with them? And then we start to look at from a psychological perspective, and we look at the behaviors, and are the behaviors of the leaders in organizations aligned to the spiritual aspects of who they are. And then we look at the neuroscience piece, and then within all of that, so we're understanding the mind, the body, and the spirit, and also making sure it has a commercial impact on within the organization. My biggest risk, and it wasn't a risk because I was going to do it anyway, was when I launched my book. And when I launched my book, it was the first time publicly I put out into the corporate world that I'm a psychic medium.
Right.
And all of my closest CEOs and the boards that I work with all knew. So it really wasn't an issue. And I've read for so many of them, and a number of them have actually asked me to come into their organizations and actually run spiritual workshops for their team to really help them to be true to who they are. And I remember there was a large organization I went to work with, and my friend who knew me very well was the finance director, and he said, I need to bring this team of 18 people together. And I said, well, can I do anything? And he said, I trust you. You just go and work your magic. He said, I want you to bring your gifts. And he used the word gifts in. And so these guys and women all walked into this space. And there was like meditation stools and backjacks on the floor in a sacred circle. There was Masaru Emoto water, with crystals. There was panpipe music that was playing. And they're either going to run away or they were going to stay. And the first thing we did was a meditation. And they stayed. And they said it was the best course they've ever been on. And even when I see them now, they say, we remembered that day. We had drumming come in, drumming circles come in, just did all sorts with them.
So I wonder then, because things have been changing so rapidly in our world, haven't they, over the last 20 years? So when we went through our, crisis, it's probably quite different for people today. I think corporations are starting to be more open. They're definitely more open to meditation.
I would agree with that. And I think, they're certainly open to mindfulness, and what that means. And there's a lot of big organizations, like Google as an example, that do a lot of work around mindfulness. But also coming back to your question, what about the individual? Because the individual, for me, I think it takes a lot of courage to make a decision that's for your highest good.
I agree.
And when you make a decision for your highest good and you act in accordance with that decision for your highest good, some people are not going to like it. I remember when I left the profession, when I decided I was no longer going to be an accountant, tax consultant. So many people came to me and said, you must be bonkers.
Yeah.
You spent 8 years studying, you've spent all this money, and you've worked with these big organizations. What are you doing? And their words were, it will never work.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's your journey, this is mine.
Yeah.
And I will make those decisions. And it took a lot of courage to do that, which is why I developed the 4-step process to help people.
Yes, so let's ask you about your 4-step process, because I agree with you. It does take tremendous courage. And even though it's changing, there still can be a backlash.
Yeah.
So would you share with us the 4-step process?
I would love to. Yeah, please. So, if you come from the concept and the place that every time we experience negativity, we're reliving the past in the here and the now.
Yeah.
So if you're in the past and you can't be present, and if you're not present, you can't consciously create what it is you want to create. And the reason for that is this: part of the human condition is that within the brain, when we experience stress and high stress, we experience high beta brainwaves in the brain. And so high beta brainwaves means that we can't actually think clearly or think coherently, because there's lots of incoherence in the body and in the heart. So when you're in that space, you can't create. So the way that you need to start to change that is through awareness. Because awareness, which is step one, and awareness starts to create presence, and it literally drags you back from the past into the here and the now. And what I say to people, just begin here. Just begin with your awareness. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, tomorrow morning when you get up, in fact, let's start tonight. When you go to bed tonight, just sit and just notice how you're feeling. And if you're feeling angry or frustrated or have anxiety or feeling sadness, you're about to go to sleep with your past. And, when we need to change our energy in that moment, and when we change our energy, we change our life, as a friend of mine, Dr. Joe Dispenza, says. And when we start to change our energy and we change our life, that's when the magic starts to happen. But we have to have awareness to do that first. And so then tomorrow morning when you wake up, decide, start to notice through awareness how you feel. And if you feel angry or sad or anxious or guilty or worried, then you're about to take your past into your day, and you're going to create this repetition all day. So decide how you want to feel, and I'll explain how to accelerate this in a minute. So you again start to change your feelings, your emotions, and all day you start to become aware of how you feel. And so that makes you more present in your life. Step two is about acknowledgement and appreciation. One of the biggest challenges today is about acknowledging how we feel. And the thing is, negativity is happening for a reason. There's something there for us to learn. And so by acknowledging it and expressing it, what we're doing is we're transmuting the energy, we're releasing the energy, we're shaking it up in the body. And when I mean express it, I don't mean go, if someone makes you angry, go and punch them in the nose. What I mean is, elegantly verbalize how you're feeling. Or if you can't verbalize it, then write it down or do something to move the energy. Because what happens is neuroscience has proven that when we actually start to express and when we actually start to make decisions for ourselves, then it builds confidence, and it builds courage, and then we want to do more and more and more of it. And so, but it also changes the brainwave. So we move from high beta to medium beta down to low beta. The more that we do that, and the more that we do, become more and more present. And as we're doing it, we're breathing as well. So as we breathe, we then come down to alpha, and then you start to get peak performance, because you then get some coherence in the body and in the mind. And so then we're able to then act, which is the third step, for our highest good. And when we act for our highest good, it comes back to what we were saying just a moment ago. It's at making decisions for ourselves that honor ourselves for our highest good. It is not selfish to make a decision that honors you. Because selfishness can ultimately lead to selflessness. Because when we take care of ourselves and we experience heightened levels of emotions in our body, like love and joy and excitement and wonder, we want to help other people to feel that way. So by taking care of ourselves first and receiving ourselves, we're able to serve others from a higher perspective. So when we act for our highest good, if someone doesn't like what you say or what you do, that's their stuff. And what you can do is, I say, if this is you and this is somebody in your space, if this is your vibration, it's somebody else's vibration, what we don't do is we don't compromise ourselves and do something out of obligation because we think we should. what we do is we invite them to ascend and rise up. We create the space for them to learn and to be around us. But if someone's not ready, then we don't stop our journey. We just keep going. We keep going.
Right.
Eventually, they may catch up. And the reason I say that, and I've learned that myself, is because when I left the professions and I was getting loads of abuse and verbiage and toxic words thrown at me from what I thought were friends at the time, I just turned the flame down. I just took the attention off. I turned the flame down to a pilot light. I didn't snuff it out. And then they came back to me. It's interesting. Very recently, one of those people came back to me and said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. It was all about me. It was my stuff.
So I just want to clarify, because when you said, well, I turned the flame down, what I thought you meant, and I think I misunderstood you, is that you turned your flame and your brightness down in response. Because a lot of people, that's what they do. To be accepted is they turn their power down.
And that would be this.
Yes, because when they turn it up, they get unwanted attention that feels painful to them. So that wasn't what you were saying when you said you turned the flame down.
So what I mean by turning the flame down, so when wherever we put our attention or wherever we put our focus is where we flow our energy.
Right.
So if I'm flowing my energy and I'm putting a lot of attention if you think about a flaming energy into a relationship and that relationship ends up being toxic. Right. And these people were saying to me at the time, so many naysayers around, why are you leaving the accountancy profession? You've studied, you've done all this study, all this investment's gone into you. It's very selfish what you're doing, and blah, 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 blah. Excuse me. So what I chose to do with the relationships of those people is turn down the attention that I was putting into them. So I was turning down the flame that was in that relationship to just so that it was a highlight, as opposed to burning a bridge and snuffing it out.
Gotcha.
My flame was here. I was just turning the attention down on it because I didn't want to be around those people anymore. And as a result, they just left my life. And then they came back in. When they became a vibrational match to me, they came back into my life. And then they apologized. So I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yes, gotcha. And of course, what you're talking about it's a common thing that happens to one on the spiritual journey, that it is a massive letting go. And as your vibration increases and you continue forward on your spiritual path, for those people who don't take the opportunity to match that vibration, you may end up saying goodbye to a lot of people, either permanently or temporarily. And as you've been saying, you may end up saying goodbye to who you thought you were, all of those labels that we define ourselves with. And I don't know about you, but my experience has been, I've been through a few times where when you do such a big, huge shedding, who am I?
Totally.
Who am I now? Because I'm not these things I thought I was. So that's another thing that can happen.
And that's the emphasis on I am not these things.
Yes,
that
exactly.
I thought I was.
Yeah.
And it's become very interesting in the fact that we have less interest in materiality, and more interested in actually having experiences with amazing people, and we become more and more present with those people. And I just want to finish off step 3 because for me, the most important thing about step 3 is kindness. And it's so important that we are kind to ourselves as we go on this journey, because it's very, very easy for us if things don't work out, or if we go over a bumpy bit, or it becomes a little bit clunky, that we beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
And that one, when we beat ourselves up, that just takes us back to the past.
Yeah.
And the more present we can actually stay with ourselves and be kind to ourselves, the more we will rise up. And then when we start to rise up, we want to help other people to rise up. So kindness is very, very important. And my wife often says, rather than beat yourself up, why don't you take yourself into your common sense corner? So a lot of our clients have common sense corners. So, they'll sit, and I get photographs from clients with their common sense corner. So I'm just, rather than beating myself up, I'm just in my common sense corner saying, Clayton, we've made this mistake a number of times. When are we going to learn from it? Okay, we need to change our behavior. And when we change our behavior, magic starts to happen. And then there is a way, just come back to your point, and I talk about it in my book. I talk about 8 truths in my book. And truth 4 is what is yours will come to you. And so if everybody who's listening knows that what is theirs is going to come to them anyway, and then, hey, how about we just let go, detach, and feel that relief, you know, and just allow, you know, be present in our life and just allow these things to come to us, because, and it does come to us, because it's an old paradigm of thinking through Newtonian law that says we have to set a goal and take all this action to go after it. That's the old way. Quantum physics is now proving is that if we're a high enough vibration and we're a vibrational match to things that we want to create, it will just come to us, often in a way that we least expect.
And so we just need to receive what's already ours.
And exactly, and that's often the biggest challenge. The amount of people who I spend time with, you know, from a coaching perspective on my events, who have problems receiving. And I say to them,
it's the truth, isn't it? So many people are out of balance on their giving and receiving.
Sorry, go on, Corey.
Yeah, it's one of the things when I teach, and I teach about manifestation. I said the biggest holdback to you receiving your setting the intention and receiving your manifestation is you don't see it when it comes to you. It goes right by you, and if you don't grab it, it disappears. And people have a tendency to have these wonderful dreams and wonderful aspirations, and I've seen it come to them, and they're just blind to this wonderful gift that's coming their way.
Or they can't allow themselves to have it.
They can't allow themselves, even though they think they want it. When it does come, oh no, I can't do that, you know.
Yeah, and there's 2 things I just want to say around that. The first one is around the giving and receiving. And I read the runes for people as part of the psychic readings that I do. And one of the runes in there is Gebo, which looks like a letter X.
I do.
And Gebo is the rune of giving and receiving. And the metaphor that I often use is about when you give, it's like breathing out. And the more you give and you give and you give and you breathe out and you breathe out and you breathe out and you breathe out and you breathe out, you give, breathe out, breathe in, and receive, you're going to suffocate. And often that's a bit of a shock because they go, oh my God. And then linking that back into the point that you said, Corey, that people don't actually see. Years ago, one of our friends said, I want to manifest my soulmate. And she was working with my wife, Lindsay, on that. Lindsay's written a great book around that. And Lindsay said to her, she said, well, he maybe stood right in front of you. And in fact, he stood right in front of her. And she hadn't seen him. And they're now married and they had 2 kids and it's a very happy time. And, you know, so it was an amazing outcome.
Well, we're going to go to another break, and we will continue with this delightful conversation when we get back. So, listeners, you're listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and today we're joined by Clayton John Ainger, and we've been talking all about the ego amongst other things. So
amazing show.
Yeah, join us in a few moments after these few short messages. Welcome back, listeners, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey and our guest, Clayton John Ainger. And Clayton has written a book called The Ego's Code, and he has been sharing with us some of his deep insights into the nature of who we are as spirit, in a body on planet Earth, and what it's all about, and how the ego is an instrument that's meant to help us expand our consciousness, how it's a feedback mechanism for us, and not something to be resisted, but something to be embraced and related to and aware of. And
sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, you know. It's interesting, and just as a Leslie got to share a bit about personal nature with you, but myself as well. my life changed about a little over 10 years ago when I was put into a traumatic situation, and I ended up choosing myself over everything else in this world. And a lot of people say, well, that's egotistical. No, it wasn't egotistical. It was, I finally accepted myself, and I loved myself enough to make that choice. And from there on, my life completely changed. It was incredible.
I remember when I left my marriage. So my daughter is now 14 tomorrow, and it was about 12 years ago, a little bit more than that, 12 and a half years ago. And I remember I was unhappy, but also I had an 18-month-old daughter. And I went into meditation to connect with my guides because I needed some guidance and support on that. And they said to me, if you stay, your daughter will never experience her father's love.
Wow.
And so I left. And I have the most amazing relationship with my daughter, and I wouldn't change anything for that. And sometimes we have these tough decisions to make, and everything for me accumulated at the same time. I left the professions, I left the marriage, I piled on so much weight. I was on, for UK listeners, about 18 stone. For overseas, it's about 282 pounds. I had so much debt. It was just a chaotic, crazy time. Everything came to a big halt. And it was like Vesuvius going off. But I needed to make a change, otherwise I was going to stay in pain. But so many people stay in pain, and we don't have to. But it does take courage to do that. It does take a lot of courage to do that. I see it often with elders around us because of the old generation, but I also see a lot of elders around who are leaving relationships as well, because they're unhappy, because they want to take care of themselves. But everybody needs to make their own decisions for who they are. And my biggest learning for me was that, would I change anything? No. But I didn't have to stay sat in the negativity for as long as I did. I could have got the learning a lot faster. I could have made the transformation a lot faster. I could have made the changes a lot faster. But we get caught up in this unconscious spiral of negative learning. But we don't have to do that. We can actually break free from that, which is what I love. And we're healing the soul. My work is all about soul rejuvenation.
So I could keep talking to you for hours, and there's so many questions I would like to ask you. But normally, in the last portion of the show, one of the things that we do is we like to ask some of our listeners questions so that our listeners can benefit from the wisdom of our guests. Would you be willing to help a couple of our listeners?
I would love to do that, but before I do that, can I just give you the fourth?
Yes,
point?
Please. Yes, in fact, I wanted to ask you about your 8 truths as well.
What?
I'll come back on.
What? Why don't we do that and don't worry about the questions, because we're going to run out of time if we do both.
Sure. Then let's do that. Let's keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, so the fourth piece is about acceleration. And and we can accelerate this, and this is again from my own learning and my own experience through meditation. Nice. And when we meditate, we're changing our energy. And when we sit down and meditate, like my daughter just started meditating, and I said to her, I said, how do you feel? And she said, nah. And I said, is that like a teenage phrase? I said, what's that mean? And she said, well, I don't know what I'm looking for. And I said, well, what I invite you to do is notice how you feel before, and you should feel something, you should feel differently afterwards. And so she started to monitor this. And we don't have to meditate for long, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. With advanced meditators, can be an hour. I sometimes meditate for up to 2 hours. But it depends on what's going on. In our busy lives, it's very important to meditate. And we can ask, for guidance and support from the divine through meditation. But also, for me, it's also about life being a walking meditation. We need to be able to change our energy whilst we're awake, whilst our eyes are open, not just whilst we're meditating as well. And that's a very, very, very powerful time. And, I've got a meditation called the Ego's Code meditation, which accelerates, it's a process which helps people to release negativity and have the soul return. and it's, and so any form of meditation. My personal favorites are Tom Kenyon. Anything by Tom Kenyon is brilliant. Anything by Dr. Joe Dispenza is brilliant. And those are my personal favorites in addition to the ones that I do, because they help me to change my energy. They help me to get clear on creations that I want to create. So that's the fourth thing. Meditate. Doesn't have to be long.
Yeah.
I said to a client of mine who's creating her twin flame soulmate, I said, every day you don't meditate and connect to the divine is you're adding another day to when you arise. And she's meditating actively every day for 20 minutes. And another lady who I know did exactly the same thing. And she literally walked up to this bar. Her car broke down. And she didn't know why the car broke down. Never broken down, almost a new car. And so she went into this bar to get some help. And literally, as she was touching the door, she had this message come in: your life will never be the same again. And she opened the door and walked straight into her twin flame soulmate. They are now together in a beautiful relationship. She came straight out of the bar, switched on her car, and the car started straight away. And we all experience these things.
Yes. No, thank you for that. And listeners, if you're a regular listener, here's someone else telling you to meditate. Because that's my answer for everything.
Just do it.
Next, he's going to tell us that we all have to ground as well.
Get grounded.
Yeah, funny enough, the beginning of the Ego's Code meditation is a 15 minutes grounding session.
There you go, because that's the first thing that I teach anybody is how to ground. So perfect, fabulous. So let's ask you more about the Ego's Code. And you mentioned before that there are 8 truths, and so far you've shared one truth with us. What are some of the other truths that you can share with our listeners?
I'll whip through them for you.
Thank you.
So truth 1, with each of these, there's a lesson that goes with them. Okay. So truth 1 is that you matter, and you need to take time to get to know you. And this is about looking at you, noticing you, seeing you, hearing you. So many times that we go through life in automatic pilot. And it's interesting because neuroscience has now proven that we spend 95% of our time unconscious.
Oh, absolutely.
And in 24 hours in a day, if I give you 8 hours a night sleep, you are literally unconscious for 15 hours in the remaining 16 hours. So you're just awake in your day consciously for 1 hour. But the more time we spend with ourselves, understanding what makes our heart sing, what brings us joy, and going into those dark corners which cause us fear and all those kinds of things, and getting excited by that and bring adventures into our life, that's all about you, and you matter. So truth 2 is all the answers you seek lie within.
Right.
Listen carefully and hear you. The amount of times, people look outside themselves and they ask for guidance. It's okay to ask for guidance, but just remember, when friends and family and colleagues give you their opinion, it's just their opinion. That's through their filters. And there may be a slight misalignment between who you are and what they think. And it may be really great advice. Trust your intuition around it. But 9 times out of 10, if you go inward and you connect with you and you ask yourself the question, what is my truth in this situation? Your divine higher self won't lie to you, can't lie to you. So go inwards. Truth 3, you must go into and go through the resistance. Learning is the route to being. What you resist will persist. The more you ignore your negativity, the bigger the teeth it will get. Yep. If you are experiencing resistance, surrender to it. Go into it. Go through it. And it is 99% of the time when people have gone through the resistance, including myself, it's never been as bad as what we make it out to be. So give yourself that gift. Truth 4 is what is yours will come to you. In fact, it's already in your energy field.
Yeah.
Quantum physics has proven that you are 99.9999999999999% energy. So you're already connected to everything. So what's yours will come to you. Truth 5, speak highly of yourself and you will naturally change your results. Language has energy and power. So notice how you speak about yourself and to yourself, because that can keep us stuck in the past. Truth 6, your environment will enable you to flourish or falter. This is really, really important. 3 quick things on the environment. First one, Look at the habits that you have. What are you doing to yourself that keeps you small? What are you doing with yourself and for yourself that enables you to rise up? So do more of the latter. The second thing, look at the people who you hang out with. They are a representation of your energy. Who are those people who are causing you problems and naysayers? As I said, turn the pilot light flame down on them, give them less energy and focus, and they will leave. And spend time with the people in your community of unconditional love and trust who want to rise you up. And then the third thing, look at your physical environment and clean it up, put away the clutter. Truth 7, the more you love your life, the more your life will love you. Simple. Love your life as a passion. Fall in love with your life. Do the things that are like an adventure for you. And then finally, truth 8 is there's always an opportunity for kindness. And we have spent a lot of time talking today about kindness. So, quick whirlwind tour on the 8 truths. I go into a lot of detail in my book on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're actually at the end of the show, but I'm so glad that you managed to fit in all of your 8 truths. So if our listeners would like to get a hold of a copy of the Ego's Code, or they would like to connect with you because of your work, how can they do that?
Okay, so they can follow me on Twitter. They can get a copy of the book. It's on Amazon.com. It's on paperback. It's on Audible as an audio book. It's on an ebook. They can come and join me at an event. I'm running an event in Canada in just 3 weeks' time, 1st, 2nd, 3rd of December in Toronto.
Fantastic.
So people can come and play if they want to come and join us for the weekend. The information's on my website, on the homepage. They can get the Ego's Code meditation as well from Amazon.com, or through my website. If they join my community on my website, they will get free meditations and all sorts of free goodies, every month that I do. So,
did you say your website? Is it
ClaytonJohnAnger.com, AINGER.
Great. Well, thank you once again. And so listeners, you heard it. That's how you can connect with Clayton John Anger. And we're going to see you in a week from now on CIVL on 101.7 FM. You've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and with Corey.
Yes, have a great week.
Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.